Hi, boys and girls. I hope you're having a great day, and I hope the work this week is going well. Um, my little helper isn't going to help me today. He's a little bit grumpy, so he's with Daddy right now. Hopefully he doesn't scream and cry. He's just in a bit of a mood today. All right, so what we're going to do today is we are going to talk about fairy tales. Okay, so we're going to be doing a whole bunch of different things with fairy tales over the next couple of weeks while you guys are at home. This is what we were going to be doing at school, but since we're not at school, I thought with our read alouds, we could read fairy tales while also learning about them and working on characters and setting and all those important things about reading a story. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to learn what's a fairy tale. So one way that I like to think about a fairy tale is to think about maybe my favorite Disney movie. So if you would think about Frozen, Frozen would be a fairy tale. Wreck-It Ralph is a fairy tale. It's most fiction stories, or a lot of fiction stories, or not real stories, are fairy tales. So what we're going to do is I have this list, and we're going to go through, and most fairy tales will have all of these things in them. Okay, or at least most of them. So let's start with the first one. The first one is it's a make-believe story. So I just said that make-believe story is a fiction story. So fairy tales are fiction. Next, they have magic or spells. So take Frozen or Frozen 2. Elsa has magic, right? Okay, so there's magic. It's passed down by word of mouth over many years. So that means that when someone came up with the story, instead of writing it down and being the author, they just said it with their words. So let's say that your grandma and grandpa told your mom or dad a story, and then your mom or dad told you that story, and then you told me that story. Okay? That's how the stories were told and when they were made up. So what can happen when you do that is the story can change a little bit, because your grandma might have told your mom or dad something, and then when they told you, they told it just a little bit differently. So there's going to be a lot of the same story by different authors that sound just a little bit different, and it's because of this. Because the way somebody told it or the way that they heard it was a little bit different. And so we'll be reading some different versions so you can hear those differences, okay? Next, animals act like humans. So we learned a lot about animals the last couple months, especially polar animals, and we know that those animals don't act like people. Well, in the stories that we're going to read, a lot of them act like people. They talk, they walk like people. Okay, so we're going to learn about that. A lot of them will begin with once upon a time or something like that, like once there was, okay? And then they'll end with happily ever after. So a lot of times in these fairy tales, the story will end, the last word will be, and they lived happily ever after. Or if they don't say that, there's usually a happy ending, okay? In a fairy tale, there's usually a villain, okay? So Frozen, the villain was Hans. He wasn't very nice to Anna and Elsa, right? Okay, so a villain is the bad guy. He's the one that tries, it can also be a girl. Sometimes the villain is a bad girl, okay? Next, they have the good character, the good guys, okay? So Elsa and Anna in Frozen would be the good guy, okay? A lot of them will have princes and princesses. Again, in Frozen, they have, or Anna and Elsa are princesses, and then Elsa becomes queen. Okay, so a lot of fairy tales will have a prince or princess. There will usually be a castle or a forest in the fairy tale, so you'll have to think about the different stories that we read. And is there a castle? Is there a forest? And then usually the nice character is not treated very nicely. Okay, so the good character, the character that is the good guy, something bad happens to them. Usually the villain or the bad guy is trying to do something not very nice to them. Okay, so that's what makes up a fairy tale, and we'll be talking about these as we read through the book. Again, a lot of them will be in each book, but sometimes there won't be every single one. There'll just be most of them, okay? All right, so I'm going to send this out to your parents here in the next week or so, or if not sooner. And what it is it helps us think about the story as we're reading it. So it's a castle, and it has magic, setting, the opening sentence, so that's the first sentence, good characters, the problem, the solution, and the bad characters. So what was the problem they had and how did they fix it? So every fairy tale that we read will have these things in it. And so what you can do as I'm reading the stories is you can think about or write down where you hear these things in the story. And just today, instead of you filling it out or doing anything, I'm just going to talk about what those things would be. All right? So the first fairy tale that we're going to spend a lot of time on, or a couple of days on anyways, is Little Red Riding Hood. So some of you may have heard this story before, but remember, it might have been by a different author, which means the story might be just a little bit different. Okay? And I also brought home a bunch of Little Red Riding Hood books. So I have all different kinds that we'll read, and we'll kind of talk about the things that are the same in each book and the things that are different in each book. All right? All right, so let's go ahead and start. So this is Little Red Riding Hood. The author of this one is Mara Alperin, and the illustrator is Loretta Schreier. Okay? So Little Red Riding Hood. Lots of ending pages. Here we go. All right. Once there was a little girl who loved to wear red. She had red shirts and red skirts, red shoes, and a fabulous bright red cloak. Her name was Little Red Riding Hood. So you can hear at the beginning, it didn't start with once upon a time, but it did start with once there was a little girl. So it's almost the same. Early one morning, Little Red's mother packed up a basket. I have a very special job for you, she told Little Red. Granny is feeling poorly. Will you take her this fresh fruit? Of course, cried Little Red, and she put on her favorite cloak and kissed her mother goodbye. It was a bright sunny day, and Little Red skipped through the woods. Good morning, she called to the rabbits and deer. I'm bringing Granny a special surprise. But someone was peeping from behind the tree. A big, hungry wolf. Good day, growled the wolf. What are you doing in the woods all alone? I'm taking the special basket of fruit to Granny, Little Red replied. Yuck, thought the wolf. He didn't like fruit. He liked to eat tasty little girls. Ugh. So the wolf thought up a plan, a horrible, clever plan. Why not pick Granny some lovely flowers, he said. So as we're just a couple pages into the story, I want you to start thinking, who is the good character, or the person or animal that is good, and which character or person or animal is bad? If I had to guess right now, I would say Little Red is the good character, and the wolf is the bad character because he said he wants to eat little girls. Oh no! The wolf knocked on Granny's door with a thud, thud, thud. Is that you, Little Red, my dear? Called Granny. Yes, squealed the wolf. Let me in. It's breakfast time. Oh, goody, said Granny, opening the door. What are we having for breakfast? You, cried the wolf. Ugh, yelled Granny. You're not Little Red, and she slammed the door right on his big furry nose. Ow, 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 howled the wolf. Quick as a flash, Granny ran out of the back door and into the woods to find help. Horrid old Granny, the wolf growled, rubbing his nose, but now he could put his terrible plan into action. So we definitely know that the wolf is the bad character now. So when Little Red knocked, tap, 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 on Granny's door, it was a deep, scratchy voice that answered, Come in, my dear. Little Red walked into Granny's bedroom and stopped in surprise. Why, Granny, she said slowly, what big ears you have. The better to hear you with, my dear, croaked the wolf. And Granny, Little Red said carefully, what big hairy arms you have. The better to hug you with, my dear, growled the wolf. But Granny, Little Red whispered, what big teeth you have. The better to eat you with, my dear, snarled the wolf, and he pounced at Little Red. Just at the moment, the door burst open. In rushed Granny with the woodcutter. Stop right there, yelled Granny. Put her down now, bellowed the woodcutter, or we'll chop you up and turn you into a birdhouse. With a terrified howl, the wolf jumped out the window and ran far, far away, never to return. Little Red hugged Granny tight. I'm so glad you chased that wolf away, she said, and she gave Granny the basket of fruit. What a day of excitement, laughed Granny. Now, let's all have breakfast. The end. All right, so let's look at our paper and see what we can fill in. Okay, so the first one is magic. So there's not a character that's actually using magic, but can wolves, can they really talk and act like a person? No, so that is the magic. The wolf is acting like a person. Next is the setting. So there's two main settings in this story, and the first one I'll show you right here is that she is walking through the forest. Okay, and then the next most important setting would be at Granny's house. Okay, and remember when we talked about what is in a fairy tale, we said there's usually a castle or a forest. And there is a forest in this story. Next, the opening sentence. So the first sentence I said was, once there was a little girl. So that would be the opening sentence. It's not quite once upon a time, but it's very similar. Okay. Next is the good characters. So let's think of all the characters that did not make bad choices. So the first would be Little Red, right? She was the most important character, and she didn't do anything wrong. She was just taking her grandma some fruit. Okay, so Little Red was a good character. How about Granny? Granny would be a good character too. She tried to save Little Red, and she got away from the wolf. And then the last good character would be the woodcutter. He was the one that came and he told the wolf to get away and made the wolf run away. So we have three good characters in this story. Okay, and then we'll jump over here in the bad characters. So the bad character, there was one, and that one would obviously be who? It'd be the wolf who was trying to eat Little Red. Definitely think that is a bad character. Okay, then we have the problem. So what problem did Little Red have? Little Red was going to be eaten by the wolf. That is a big problem. The wolf tried to eat Little Red. So that is our problem. Then our solution, that's a fancy word for how they fixed it. So how did they fix the problem? Granny and the woodcutter came back to the house and they told the wolf to get out, or they were going to make him into a birdhouse. Okay, so that's how we would fill in this paper. So this is our very first fairy tale, Little Red Riding Hood, and tomorrow I will be back with another story. It will be another Little Red Riding Hood story, but it will be different. So I hope you enjoyed Little Red Riding Hood, and I will see you guys later on for Big Book. Have a great afternoon. Bye.